Before we begin, since this is a BBC-owned property, I feel the need to point out that the news arm of the BBC has a continuing issue with transphobic leanings in its news coverage. You can find in a pinned comment below various videos from both myself and other YouTubers covering this issue. And while I understand that the Doctor Who creative team is not responsible for this, I will continue to point this out for as long as it remains a consistent issue. Thank you. Whew. This is kind of a big one to go over again. I'll say up front, I'm biased in Jo Martin's favor. Yes, folks! Fugitive of the Judoon. Remember when this landed? How earth-shattering it was at the time? Oh, boy. This was such a huge deal, this episode, and revisiting it is a little odd. Because I'll just be upfront about this, and I'll try not to dwell on it over the rest of the review. A lot of the excitement and enthusiasm, at least that I had for this episode, came from a hope of all the possibilities, the potential stories to be told in explaining exactly where the Fugitive Doctor fits into the Doctor's timeline, since the implication is that this Doctor either comes in between other incarnations but has been erased, which doesn't fit other stuff we already know about Doctor Who. At least it didn't at the time. We've since learned other stuff. Timeless Child makes it all weird, but initially, those all 13 incarnations, which technically ran through Matt Smith, and then we had a recharge on the regenerations, all those incarnations were accounted for. So there wasn't really a place to put her. So the implication being she was pre-Hartnell. So if she's pre-Hartnell, why does she have a TARDIS in the shape of a police box? I mean, if she doesn't know what the sonic screwdriver is, she has to, at the latest, be between Hartnell and Troughton, because Troughton had the sonic screwdriver. But this all kind of went nowhere. I mean, even just the idea of getting to see more of Jo Martin's Doctor got me excited, regardless of what the specifics of what her backstory were going to be, and we got very little of that, too. She makes a couple more appearances down the line that don't amount to much at all. So I'm going into this as a rewatch, and it already has a major knock against it because I know all the potential that this idea and this casting especially had is wasted. Even with the idea that Chibnall did what he wanted to do. If this was all he ever wanted to do with the Fugitive Doctor is what he did, what a waste. What a waste of an idea, and what a waste of an amazing bit of casting. So, as I said, I will try not to stay on that point as I go through it, but understand that it already jumps down a not insignificant amount in my estimation due to the fact that it loses the excitement and the mystique of, ooh, where is this going? I now know where it's going, which is mostly nowhere. And so, as a result, I have to take this very much as a piece unto itself. Now, regardless of what I just said, and it dropping in my estimation, it's still not a bad episode in and of itself, and taking out, excitement or disappointment about what happens later out of the equation, it's still pretty decent, all things considered. First of all, let me just gush about Jo Martin again. She is great immediately. Ruth as a character is immediately endearing and charismatic. She holds the screen even before, getting her whole personality back. She holds the screen very well. She brings a lot of personality in just a few scenes. I liked her immediately. So she's already delivering a really good, enjoyable character even before we get later on and we get to see her say,
"Hello, I'm the Doctor."
I believe you. I believe you immediately. The way she says it, the presence that she has, and I like just little tiny moments that she has, like when when later on, when Jodie Whittaker's doctor confronts her for pointing a gun at somebody, and Jodie Whittaker goes, "The doctor would never shoot anybody," and Joe Martin goes,
I know. Shut up.
so she's more deceptive and more wily than the Jodie Whittaker doctor is, who is a bit more upfront and sincere, which also makes their scenes together good because they have very different energy, and it plays off well when they kind of bounce off each other. So pretty much everything to do with Joe Martin. Oh, you know what is a moment that I'd forgotten about, but I love? It's this moment where after she gets the text from Lee, and it kind of brings briefly the doctor to the forefront, and she sort of confronts the Judoon.
Feels like instinct against the bullies.
It's a great moment. It's a great just summation of the doctor in general, instinctively taking on the bullies. So within this episode, pretty much everything that Joe Martin does, I love. I'm still a little bitter that we didn't get more from her, but like, again, moving on. The Judoon, it's a bit of a recycle job. I mean, not only is their presence very similar. Their methodology is virtually identical to last time they showed up. The only difference is they didn't bother to transport people to the moon first this time, which is fine. They're not really the main focus, but it does feel like Chibnall has nothing to add to their appearance and is just using them in the exact same way that they got used in Smith and Jones. I will note that the lip sync on the mouth movements significantly better here than it was before. They got a lot better at that.
Fugitive match, negative.
And the episode overall, it has a good build. As we meet Ruth, we meet Lee, we see Lee being squirrely, and we assume there's something up with him, and then the surprise for, theoretically, on first viewing at least, for both the audience and the doctor, no, Lee's not who they're there for. And again, Joe Martin she does scared Ruth really well, but then she's so commanding with the doctor. The build and the trajectory of all that is actually pretty well done. It's hard to say that it's a completely satisfying story on its own, because taken as a whole, it doesn't really have a solid conclusion. Again, it feels like it is introducing a big idea to do something with later and then just largely didn't. I know I said I wasn't going to harp on this. I just can't help but keep circling back to it. But trying to keep off of that, we also have the return of Captain Jack Harkness. Now, I'm not going to go into any thoughts on John Barrowman that I have at this point. I covered a lot of what was going on with him years ago. My opinions haven't really changed, so just understand, not dealing with any of that. So as far as his appearance goes, it's kind of pointless. Honestly, it's nostalgia bait, and Barrowman brings that energy and that presence that makes him fun to have on screen, but he effectively does nothing. He yanks the companions onto his ship briefly and interacts with them, doesn't meet the doctor, has no impact on the plot that's actually going on right now, and basically is just a nostalgia bomb drop that is also the mechanism by which we introduce and tease the idea of the lone Cyberman.
Beware the lone Cyberman.
And I think teasing the coming of the lone Cyberman is a good thing to do. It just feels like a little bit of a waste to burn off the return of Jack Harkness in order to do that, considering that he, again, really does nothing. And there's so much nostalgia, a bit like how the Judoon were recycled doing the exact same thing with the exact same methodology as the last time. There's a lot of recycling with Jack as well, because he's got to mention the nanogenes.
Always the nanogenes.
Because, yeah, again, and he's on a ship that he stole again. And of course, the standard stuff that I would have expected to be recycled, like how flirtatious he is, hitting on everybody, that, fine. But it's just all these nostalgic hits, a lot of which, again, seem to have no reason to be there other than to be hits of nostalgia. And look, I can give a certain amount of leeway with hits of nostalgia, but they're piled on excessively here, to be blunt about it. And ultimately, as I said, other than deliver the tease that the lone Cyberman's coming, he doesn't do anything. of substance or of meaning or of relevance. And that wouldn't have been a problem if he himself got better payoff down the line, and he doesn't really. Like, he will come back, and I'll address that when I get to it, but that really has almost nothing to do with his appearance here. So it's just, okay, there he was. That was fun. Why, though? You don't necessarily need a deep reason to bring back a character that people love, but generally, if you're going to do it for no reason other than the fun of bringing them back, I would say you do that while having them be the primary focus of the episode. So the whole episode is just about, isn't it fun having this character back for a bit? But he's not that. He's on a single set in a couple of scenes. It's just odd. Not bad necessarily, but an odd use. I think maybe the thing to compare it with is with The Return of the Master with Sacha Dhawan, which was also in many ways a big hit of nostalgia. Not just bringing the Master back, but we bring back the tissue compression, which hasn't been seen since the 70s, I don't think. Well, no, 80s. It did show up again in the 80s. But like, it's been decades since that thing has come up. And the Master is also in many ways a hit of nostalgia. But like, there's context for the Master. So like, a whole big thing with Series 11 was that it was meant to be more accessible to new viewers who weren't following Doctor Who up to that point. And the way the Master is introduced, while it is very clear that he has history with the Doctor, within the confines of Spyfall Parts 1 and 2, he is given full and proper context of who he is and why he matters. It is explained this was the Doctor's best friend. They have been confronting each other for a very long time. And for the purposes of that story, that's really all the context you need. And honestly, he arguably even works better without old context from previous series, because we still don't actually know where Dhawan's Master falls timeline-wise, but if he does come after Missy, he probably works a little bit better if you don't know Missy and know that Missy kind of had an arc where she wasn't fighting the Doctor anymore, and now suddenly he is. But again, like, my asterisk on that is, A, we don't actually know where he falls in the Master's timeline, and B, I am actually more forgiving of this now, given that there's sort of the self-loathing layers to that character that were pretty well established by the time he wrapped up. But I ended up tangenting. But okay, so the reason I brought that up is that is also a big hit of nostalgia, big returning villain. But the difference between that and bringing Jack back is there is no context given for Jack. He just shows up, says that he knows the Doctor, doesn't do anything, drops a line that'll mean something in a couple of episodes, and then leaves. Whereas the Master, while also being a hit of nostalgia, was a major focus. A little bit to the detriment of that story, as I said in those reviews, but like, he gets proper focus and enough context that he works, and you're not left going, wait, why should I care about this person? Jack, they don't bother with that legwork, which is odd. And so overall, what we have is a actually still kind of fun, a little bit of a roller coaster episode, but that ultimately a lot of the strength of it was in the excitement of what it might mean. And that is now gone. It just is. I've got a handful of other small things to point out, both good and bad, so why don't we do that? I feel like the timing for the death of Lee is really good. It happens about halfway into the episode, so it's a real interesting twist that the whole story pivots on, and then we get the reveal of the Fugitive Doctor soon after. I also like that Lee gets referred to as her faithful companion, and this is before we know who Ruth is and know about the Fugitive Doctor, so that's a cool little tease about what's coming up. We have the character of Gat, who I think works for a division. It doesn't matter. She doesn't survive to the end of this, which is weird. I feel like it would have made a lot more sense to plant her as a recurring thing and maybe even make use of her instead of the eventual reveal of Tech Tayun, which really goes nowhere. But yeah, sure, let's use this person to introduce this whole idea and then immediately kill them. There's this really weird bit where the TARDIS gets pulled up in a tractor beam, and as we're literally watching the TARDIS get pulled up by a tractor beam, they have the Fugitive Doctor say,
Judoon have got us in a tractor beam, dragging us on board their ship.
yeah, we know. We're what? It was like I turned on audio captioning for the difficult of seeing. Like, I know that's what they're doing. I'm watching it. What? That stuck out to me so much this time. I already mentioned the Fugitive Doctor having the whole thing with like, I know, shut up with the weapon, but I like that she goes to threatening, while giving the little hint that she wasn't actually intending to kill anybody, threatening with a weapon, whereas Jodie Whittaker's doctor tries to disarm the situation by being honest. And you can see that clash because the Fugitive Doctor's like, shut up, what are you doing? You are so stupid. And so I'd like that interaction is fun. That's an interesting clash. I think the other thing, there's a little note earlier on where the doctor, Jodie Whittaker's doctor, describes the fam as a flat team structure. That'll come up later. And also we kind of open with the doctor closed off and kind of being called out for this by the companions.
You ask too many questions.
Maybe because we're worried about you? I mean, one minute you're all smiles, next minute your mind's somewhere else.
This is valid. She is closed off. She doesn't always share, but it's also a little odd because we've gone a couple of episodes since the end of Spyfall that seemed to set off like them being really concerned about the fact that she wasn't sharing, but we've had 2 whole adventures where that didn't matter, and now all of a sudden it does. I feel like that should have been sprinkled across the previous episodes, or should have been done less bluntly, sledgehammer to the face style here, bringing it back up. And they do kind of circle back to it again at the end with the doctor being very flat out like, you don't know me. And that's true. And that's a part of this doctor that I've had to come to terms with over time, that she is very bad at sharing. Like, she loves to be around people. She hates to share, anything about herself. She'll share her enthusiasm, her knowledge, not stuff about herself though. And we do get it reminded here, which it needs to be, but again, with that gap of a couple episodes where it just didn't come up, is odd. And I think that's just where I'm going to kind of leave it. There are parts of this that are still good. There are parts of this that are honestly still great. There are other parts that are just kind of weird or just don't work as well now that we know this isn't really going anywhere, which is a shame because I remember how exciting this was at the time. But what are your thoughts about this? Fugitive of the Judoon, you rewatched it lately? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, and you get rewards for every tier, including early access up to a week before these videos go live. And that's a benefit you get at any tier, and there's other benefits besides, even if you can't. Like, share, subscribe also help me out, but don't worry about it too much. What I really want you to remember is you are beautiful, you are valid, you are loved. You are the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. End of the video, so I got to shout out my top patrons. Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfulla, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Angus Bjarnason, Melinda Walters, Imudelki, The Oath of Boyd, Katoria, Toy Lowly, Becky Sparks, Fernambulax the Poodle, Zach, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Tim Price, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. Thanks for your support. If you want to hear me probably mispronounce your name as well, check out the rewards on the Patreon. How you doing there?